Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to start soon. Now we're waiting for everyone to connect, and taking the opportunity, I will just tell you a couple of technical details. The webinar will be recorded and then we will disseminate everything. And today we're going to discuss sustainability, and we will look at EU regulations, at hydrogen, and we are also going to listen to the presentation which will cover sustainability as a Kickstarter for regional aviation. And we will also listen to Andrew Murphy from Transport and Environment. He will cover and share his thoughts with us. And you are free to ask questions via Q&A and use chat to ask anything as well. And we are going to start from the welcome words from Sergio Alegre, Airport Regions Council Director General, and Thomas Meyer from ERAC. It's European Regional Aerodromes Community, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you all the people who you are there on the other side of the screen. Thank you especially to the speakers. It has been very easy to invite them and to get their yes to participate in this event. An event that I think that the difference between this webinar and probably other ones dealing with this issue of green in aviation, what is the from our side very clear, the only future of aviation is that we, as ASC, we try to focus to what is the role, responsibilities, the challenges, the opportunities that this pass to green aviation, whatever this means. Later on, we will discuss and we'll debate. For sure, we will not finish today the debate and the discussion about this issue. Have on that path, what are for the regions that they have their airport at the territory. What this means is how we can participate for the good and for the bad. For the ones you don't know, Airport Regions Council is the organizations of cities and regions that it was established, that they have an airport in the territory. It was established 27 years ago. We are in Brussels, in Roubaix Montpellier. 21, and this is our goal, that the voice of the regions is heard in Brussels at the Parliament. Today we have one MP, Mr. Rook Macker from the Netherlands, and it's a pleasure. And two, of course, the other stakeholders and the other institutions, especially the Commission, the European Commission. For us, it's a pleasure to organize this event with ERAC. We are very used to organize events with other organizations, but we do really believe and we do really practice as much as possible as ASC and our members that the issue of to get a sustainable or good aviation sector, what we think it's important, must be done and must be configured by all the stakeholders. If not, there will not be way out. We will not finish this path. We will not fix it, and that's why it's important to have these webinars, and that's why we try to get the voice of all the stakeholders. Just to give you two more information, and with this I will finish because I'm not at all the important person. The important person are the speakers. Is that we are going to organize with CMS the 21st of April another webinar about the financing of the greening and the recovery of the aviation. We talk, and it's good, about a lot of things in aviation sector, but it has to be some money. Put it on that and where it comes from and where we can find it, how we can spend it and make proposal. And this will be a webinar at 12:30 p.m. And probably most important, the 5th of May, we are going to have a live event in our facilities in Roubaix Montpellier 21 in Brussels about SAF and Refuel EU proposal. We have invited Miss Flor Diaz Pulido. We have invited the voice of the airports. We are going to have Copenhagen, airport, Brussels airport and Charles de Gaulle. We're going to have all the airlines, we're going to have the industry, and we're going to have the regions to debate about the challenges and opportunities that this proposal from the Commission fixed to us, because in our opinion, after the approval, wherever it is, hopefully this summer, the game is over. It's not more to talk about blah, 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 blah about stuff. If not, now we have, as European, every one of us to fix with this roadmap that the proposal fixed. So it's a pleasure. I hope and I am completely sure you will enjoy and we will enrich for the participation of our speakers. And thank you very much to be with us.
Yeah, thank you, Sergi. And Thomas.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Alena and Sergi, for organizing this event. Dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome also from our side, the European Regional Air Terms Community, with more than 130 local and regional airports. We are not just and a couple of air navigation service providers and also air operators. We are not just looking into technical and operational development for our infrastructures, but we would like to take part on the way for the sustainability. We run also a dedicated program for that. It's called the Runway to Sustainability. So we are looking for a navigation system which is able to cover the mobility needs by air, which is fit for the future. So such events like we have today, we are really excited to support and to take part on it. And furthermore, we try to implement a lot of these ideas. So now I'm really happy to listen to the expectations from our dear politicians and technical colleagues, the ideas and solutions which will help us to go in the direction of a sustainable aviation and mobility systems at all. Thanks a lot. I hope we can have at least a couple of minutes later on Q&A and your comments and requests. We would like to invite you to consider all those ideas. And we are at the end, we are via email always available if it fits not today to discuss by lengthy. Thanks a lot. And Alena, back to you to start with the presentations and speeches. Thank you.
Yes, we are going to start with Doreen Rockmaker. Miss Rockmaker is an MEP and she's part of European Conservatives and Reformist group. And I'm going to share your presentation and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elena. I'm so happy to be able to be part of your webinar, because I think it's very important in a situation when there's so much change that discussions and sharing of points of view are well organized by all the participators involved, because we have to understand each other very well. And well, you can do the next slide, Elena.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm a member of the European Parliament. I started working in the European Parliament in 2020. This was because of the Brexit. I'm a member of the TRAN committee. I've worked in the transport sector, but in rail. I acknowledge that transport is a very important engine for economic growth, and the same goes, of course, for aviation. I hope I can explain to you that the bit of competition between the different mobility modes, I think, should disappear for the future. And I would like to inspire you to see all these EU regulations that are part of our common future can be a challenge sometimes, but it can also be an opportunity. So, well, this is what I would hope I get across for the coming next 12 minutes or so. So next slide, please. In September 2016, there were 198 members, 91 members of the EU that pledged for a carbon market for the aviation sector. But as we all know, well, this is only partly being established now. And but what is a fact, and why we have to deal with consequences, is that in the EU, aviation is directly responsible for 3.8% of the total of CO2 emissions. And the aviation sector, if you count in the transport and everything that goes around airports, is responsible for 13.9% of emissions. And transport as a whole is responsible for a huge part of carbon emissions. And this is only the CO2 side of the story, but we also have to take into account things like nitrogen and well, water dam, which also contributes to climate change. So aviation is the second biggest source of transport greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, the European Commission focuses on aviation because of that. You can do the next slide, Elena. The Green Deal started with an ambitious 5% reduction for 2030 and 60% for 2050. And this was already very ambitious. But we all know that last year, in 2021, because of new reports and new insights, the ambition, we became as a European Union even more ambitious. And there is within the European Parliament and also within the European Commission and within the European Council, the majority of the politicians are convinced that they have to do something about climate change. So this is why I expect that the 14 proposals that are a part of this Fit for 55 will pass through the legislation process this year, maybe at the beginning of next year, last one, but I think they will go through very smoothly. And this has also to do with, of course, the situation we have now in the war in the Ukraine and the dependency that the European Union has of gas imports from Russia, which they are planning to phase out as soon as possible. So what I explained to the maritime representatives that I spoke last week is that you have to be aware that this rule and regulation package, this is huge. This is not only huge because you have to change your way of working and you have to change your business case, but it also comes with big extra administration costs. The implementation is very difficult, and I know this because I worked not only in the rail sector, but in the financial sector as well, and before I came here at the European Parliament. And all these regulations seem so simple on paper, and this is what mistakenly is underestimated time and time again. But it takes a lot of effort to make this work in practice. So these 14 proposals that are part of Fit for 55, there are only a couple of them I think are most important for aviation. Of course, this is the ETS regulation, but also RED, this is the Renewable Energy Directive, is very important. But we also have to, and of course the Energy Taxation Directive, but we also have to take into consideration that for airports, it's also important that they have to take into account that the EED goes for them as well. And this is about buildings being, well, sustainable, using renewable energies, etc. So for airports, this is important as well. And of course, we have to review EU aviation. And on top of this, we have the international regulation of the CORSIA. So these are a lot of regulations coming at the same time, trying to, if you look at the objective, they're all, their main goal is to reduce greenhouse gases. And for that reason, it's a bit of a pity, that a bit of a shame that this, all these rules and regulations couldn't be supplemented into one directive, because what we now see is that also impact analysis from the commissions are not integrated. There's not a whole picture of what's coming to you as a subject of all these new rules and regulations. So this means this adds to the complexity of the whole thing. Okay, next slide, please. So what I'm trying to say is that I think aviation, and also this means airlines, but also airports, have a lot of challenges and risks. And if you, well, what I did, I went to the internet and I searched for integrated risk analysis for airlines and for airports. But what you see mostly is that these organizations are focused on safety, which of course is logic from the perspective of the it's historically, I think, explainable. And of course, safety is a huge and an important risk, and a lot of attention should go in that direction. But for as an organization, as a business, it's important to focus on other risks as well, as we see now, as we have seen with the pandemic of COVID-19. What we see, the growing competition and the compliance pressure and the incapacity to innovate makes it more and more a challenge to gain a positive business case. So from this perspective, you can say that aviation is a risky business, not only because of safety issues, but also because of a lot of issues as well. And as a banker, I know that bankers look at businesses from this kind of point of view, and this means that if they make the same analysis, financing costs will go up as well, because the higher the risk, the higher the cost of finance. So is this next slide, please? seems to be maybe a negative a message, but I don't want to see it as a negative situation where the aviation is in right now. I think the situation of the climate change, the rules and regulations, the geopolitical stress, well, all the risks that I summed up in my previous slide pose a challenge for the business to change. And as a former risk manager, I think it's important that if you are faced with a lot of risk, one of the strategies that you can use is to diversify. And so I think mainly regional airports and airlines focusing on regional airports should take into account that that maybe it's wise to diversify. And that means that they shouldn't see an airport as a port for airlines, but maybe they should change this into a port for transport, for mobility transport. And this, also with trains, and of course with electric cars. And if you have mobility from road and from rail, of course you have to be able to fuel them. So there's a lot of issues and a lot of possibilities raising there. An airport can be a transport hub, but it can also be a destination, like for instance, big airports already are, but especially in regions where there is a low population density, regional airports can specialize or diversify in becoming a place where you can shop and where you can entertain. And of course, if you change in that direction, you can see an airport as an engine for innovation. And I think an engine for innovation is something that suits the aviation sector very well, because the aviation sector has always been about innovation. So next slide, please. So my takeaway in this short presentation is that the EU legislation in response to climate change creates threats, but these threats, you can see them as a challenge and as a starting point from thinking about your business case, your business proposal in a more creative way. And this means that maybe you should develop into a multiple functional transport hub. So not an airport, but a transport. And in that way, you will be able to create added value. And by diversifying, you also will mitigate risk. Thank you. This was my last slide.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. And I would like to ask you one question, just because, yeah, we represent regions. And as you previously mentioned, we all have to be together and to be able to discuss our way to sustainability and how to take all the regions on board. Maybe you have an advice, or maybe you have a thought on it?
Well, I think it's very, very important that if you, thank you for this question, Milena, by the way, because this is really important. I discussed this with Maritime as well last week. And well, of course, aviation has always had a strong lobby, but I'm not so sure about the regional airports being that well connected with Brussels. So I think it's very important that you start, I think, as a sector, with an impact analysis of these regulations, these directives that I mentioned in my presentation, and to ask yourself the question, what's the impact it's going to have on the sector as a whole, but also on my regional hub, on my regional airport, so that it becomes clear to you what to do next. And I think second step would be to, if you are able, and I would really recommend it, to try to come up with a shared strategy to adapt to the new rules and regulations that are formulated by the EU, because they will be there, and they will only get tougher. This is something that you have to realize. I can't make it any better. You know, this is the fact, and this is going to be so it's a huge challenge, and I think you can only face it if you unite, and in this meeting with the maritime sector, there were also people from the European Commission. And well, we discussed a bit because, well, I challenged them because there are a lot of people working in the European Commission that have never worked in an industry or in an organization in their lives. So for them, it's relatively easy, although they do impact analyze. They do them. So I don't want to look down on all the work that they're doing, and I don't want to talk bad about them, but they're not so much connected with reality. So if for you as a sector, it's really important that you tell the European Commission what all these rules and regulations have, what kind of impact they have on your day-to-day practice. Because they probably don't know. They really don't know. They're looking at the future, and they're trying to construct a world in which the environment is better protected better, but they're not so much thinking about what impact it has for aviation. And of course, these regional airports are very important, and especially the MEPs from Sweden, for example, and other low density areas, of course, Malta, Portugal, and Madeira. These are the MEPs that are especially, well, they have a certain sensibility they know how important it is to have regional airports. So I would think it's best for you if you try to connect with them. But then, of course, we have to get the message across to, well, for instance, politicians from the Netherlands who are so used of being in the middle of everything, and they don't always see the problems that could arise. So it's really important if you are able to come up with a shared vision, and as the guy from the Commission said, if you come up with a concrete plan, so say a pilot or how a regional hub should be, a vision that you can present to the European Commission, that would be a really nice step forward, because then you can bring them along in the way you want to go, and you have to think about this whole issue, I think, in a win-win terms. So a better environment, but also better connections in the future.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And we are going to the next speaker, and it's Andrew Murphy from Transport and Environment, and the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks very much. And thank you, Elena, for chairing this, and for Ms. Rookemaker for your comments on this topic. So Transport and Environment is a European-level sustainable transport organization. I don't have any slides prepared for today's event. I'll just talk and hopefully maintain your attention. I lead TNE's aviation work and have done so for the last 8 years. If you look at the growth in emissions from the aviation sector in Europe, they've grown substantially since 1990, but they really started to accelerate after 2014, which is just after I joined TNE. So I guess I should take some responsibility for that. But I think, you know, it's worth looking at why aviation emissions have grown so much, who to blame, and what exactly is the solution. Because I think everyone here is trying to focus on the solutions to make the sector more sustainable. Because whether you're a user of aviation or work in the industry, you know how essential it is to our prosperity. So there's a few reasons from our perspective why aviation emissions have gone up so much. I think two of them that I'd like to talk about today is firstly the belief that aviation is a difficult to decarbonize sector. And this is a phrase which is often used, oftentimes by the industry itself. I think it's worth taking a look at lots of different parts of the economy and recognize that for many parts of the economy, it's difficult to decarbonize them. That's why we're having such a difficult time addressing climate change. We have more solutions in the heating sector, sure, but it's harder to convince individuals to change how they heat their homes or to turn down the amount of heating they use. We have solutions for agriculture. It involves changing our diet, but it's, again, very difficult. Steel, concrete, these are all difficult sectors to decarbonize. So we don't accept the idea that it's difficult to decarbonize sectors. And sometimes that's used as something of an excuse to justify lesser targets for aviation, relying on offsetting, for example. Which brings me to the second reason why I believe emissions have gone up so much from the aviation sector, and it's the use of the phrase international aviation, which gives the impression that these are emissions which exist neatly somewhere over the Atlantic and are outside the reach of regulators, unlike the way cars or buildings are regulated by governments. And what this combination of it's difficult to decarbonize and it's international done is left us in the last 20-25 years relying on International Civil Aviation Organization to reduce emissions from the sector. The Kyoto Protocol did ask states to cooperate through ICAO. They took that to mean just go to ICAO and largely do nothing else. And their confidence in some respects wasn't misplaced. ICAO is an organization which does have a good record over the years on things like safety and security. And we've seen a tremendous improvement in the safety performance from the aviation sector. I think 2018 was the first year ever where there was no major civilian aviation accident. That's credit both to industry and to ICAO, which has led in a lot of these issues. But unfortunately, what we've had out of ICAO in the last 20 plus years is inaction or policies which have proven to be ineffective. For example, an aircraft CO2 standard, which is technology following instead of technology forcing. And if you want to actually do something, you need a technology forcing standard, such as we have in the road transport sector. And we've had this reliance on the CORSIA offsetting scheme. So what has this gotten us? It's left the aviation sector in a terrible position from a climate point of view, but it's also left the sector in a terrible position from an energy point of view. It's perhaps the only sector, shipping to some extent also, where some similar dynamics play out, which is 100% reliant on fossil fuels. And we're now seeing the consequences of that in the enormous spike in the price of oil, in the demands for an immediate reduction in the use of Russian oil. When you leave your sector reliant on a fossil energy in the 21st century, you're leaving yourself open to an enormous amount of risk. And I think sometimes in industry, I think industry gets it more. Sometimes the regulators, be they at European or national level, there's still a belief that we need to go through ICAO, or that ICAO is the perfect place to regulate. And a few weeks ago, the French presidency led an initiative called the Toulouse Declaration, which in many respects is a good declaration. And we're seeing some decent stuff out of the European Commission, the legislation, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But it still had a reference to ICAO establishing a long-term aspirational goal. Aspirational goals and long-term targets are interesting, but they're only as interesting as as the adoptees' ability to follow them up with concrete and binding measures. And the reality is ICAO, without an enormous budget, without an enforcement mechanism, simply isn't able to turn a long-term aspirational goal into the sort of short-term effective measures. So we have to have a relentless focus on measures which are adopted at European level, which are adopted at national level, if we're serious about bringing the sector forward. We're starting to see some of that from the European Commission. It published its Fit for 55 package just in last July, and it took some very important steps forward. It improved the pricing mechanism, though, of ETS, though unfortunately didn't extend it to the majority of flights, which is those long-haul flights departing from Europe. But most importantly, it got involved in introducing a mandate to gradually blend in sustainable alternative fuels. And ultimately, that's getting to the heart of the problem. It's important to put correct pricing mechanisms in place. Efficiency improvements are also important to some extent, but ultimately the sector needs to burn something other than fossil jet fuel if it wants to be both sustainable from a climate point of view, but also financially sustainable. Now, that package is now working its way through the co-decision process, and there's good and bad in the lawmaking process, as I'm sure Mr. Rueckmaeker knows. The good is that there is a lot of interest and enthusiasm to make it better, in terms of its scope, addressing non-CO2. But we're still seeing some evidence from some of the legacy carriers that they're still kind of pushing for a weakening of the Fit for 55 measures. And I think this is where it's important to recognize for the Fit for 55 measures that they are a good starting point for the beginning of decarbonisation, but that they're not actually going to bring us the way we need to. And two reasons for that. The main reason for that is the technology is taking time to be deployed. So sustainable alternative fuels, we think the most promising is a type of e-kerosene produced from electricity. But that requires an enormous amount of electricity, renewable electricity, which we don't yet have on hand. And it will take some time to ramp that up. Maybe some of the changes we're seeing in the coming weeks around permitting for renewables, investing in renewables will help accelerate that. But it still takes time. For aircraft, there are some promising opportunities for aircraft and exciting opportunities as well for the European aeronautical industry. To be able to lead the way globally, producing some of these aircraft, which will be of interest to regions around the world. Europe can really get ahead and become a leader in this aeronautical industry. The aeronautical industry is, I think, the crown jewel in Europe's industrial policy. The European cooperation which brought Airbus together was fantastic. Its profitability in the last year, I think 4.1 billion last year, has been exceptional. Let's continue to lead and make sure that we stay ahead of the competitors. But still, even with the enthusiasm that we have for zero-emission aircraft, it will take 2030 to come into operation for some of the very short-haul aircraft for a few hundred kilometers. It will be 18%, and then 2035 for some of the more regional ones, representing maybe 18% of European emissions. These manufacturing these aircraft can create good jobs, good investment, good exports for Europe. It needs a lot of support. It needs the kind of support that's getting some of the other industries off the ground. And what I'd say as well for Fit for 55, it's the beginning of finally getting to come to terms with the sector's climate impact. As someone based in Brussels and as someone very committed to the EU, I have to say, EU laws can't solve everything. There has to be a next step taken at national level or regional level. There has to be very strong coordination from industry players such as airports and airlines. So let's make sure that we see the 55. Let's make sure we push back on some of the short-term industry lobbying, in particular the sort of older carriers who are still a bit committed to the ICAO way. Let's push back on what they're saying. Let's make sure we strengthen the 55 package, and let's see it as the beginning of a more comprehensive package and beginning of a good decade where we'll see some of these technologies, be they fuels or aircraft, addressing aviation CO2 or non-CO2 effects addressed. And that's the end of my presentation. So that's just used to have a slide which says last slide.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your review. And I really want to ask you, especially because you didn't really talk about it, but what do you think? What's your opinion on trains versus planes? How do you see it? Can the trains really, replace short-haul destinations?
Some short-haul destinations. I think it's It's good to improve the European rail network because it's good to have a more effective European rail network. It's good to have things like, and I'm not as much of a rail expert as Ms. Rubenmaker, but it's good to be able to book train tickets easier. It's good maybe to have a bit more competition. It's good to have more night trains options. That's a good thing to have in and of itself. We should be trying to knit together the continent, and we should be able to get very easily from Paris to Berlin to Warsaw by train. That's a good thing to have. Will it reduce aviation emissions? Yes, to some extent. But I think if there's one disappointment in the debate around aviation emissions the last year or two, it's this excessive focus on short-haul emissions. And no one likes the idea of somebody taking a flight from Paris to Amsterdam. But the other problem is long-haul aviation emissions. And that's where the solutions are more complicated. It's nice to talk about everyone getting a train, but we do need to address those long-haul aviation emissions if we're going to have a more comprehensive program.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I think now, Thomas, you would like to answer the question. We have a question on in Q&A, and it's difficult one, but yeah, you want to answer, please?
Yes. There's it's not a question in the Q&A. It's from Günter Martis, a comment with regards to the postponement of the development. I would like to state clearly this is not, at least in our case, not correct. We are pushing a lot forward the sustainable technologies, be it e-fuels, be it SAF, be it hydrogen, be it new business models. As Ms. Rubenmaker pointed out exactly correctly, we need to find new business models, and we need to change our business cases. The diversity of our business is very important. This is especially a good field of doing the things on small and medium-sized enterprises, and the regional airports are exactly that. This is better to say we are on the front line to change and not on postponing and blocking the things. So I hope this answers or give an additional idea on your comment. And let's go to the other ideas from our technical colleagues, especially from Professor Callo. I think he will provide you a couple of ideas which are not far away to go into the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we have a little change because Professor Callo is busy right now, so he will join us later, I hope. And now we are going to move to Lars Elvering. He's a project manager at the Berlin-Brandenburg Aerospace Alliance, and he will speak on sustainability as a Kickstarter for regional airports. So welcome.
Thank you. So I hope you can see the presentation from now on.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just go ahead. So I'm asking a question rather than giving an answer. So can sustainable aviation be a Kickstarter for the renaissance of regional airports? Let me start with a short introduction of what the Berlin-Brandenburg Aerospace Alliance is and what we are up to at the moment. The BBAA is the trade association for the aerospace industry in Berlin and Brandenburg, and most of our members are small and medium-sized enterprises. We also have original equipment manufacturers like Rolls-Royce Germany and a couple of general aviation aircraft manufacturers. But as, for example, Andrew already mentioned, or you, Thomas, most of the innovation in the sustainable aviation industry comes from small and medium-sized enterprises and startups at the moment, which is why we as an alliance looked at or put our focus increasingly on low emission aviation, following what our members suggest and want at the moment. And I personally joined the BBAA in 2018 within the project IBIFA, which had the goal to bring together the stakeholders in our region to initiate projects related to sustainable aviation. So we had airfields, universities, manufacturers, suppliers, a broad spectrum throughout our whole membership, joining in to see where we can go. Back then, from outside our region, also we were joined by Siemens E-Aircraft, which is by now part of Rolls-Royce, as many of you might know, which are, at least in Germany, leading when it comes to electrification of aviation in general. The result of IBIFA was a paper of more than 100 pages pointing out a variety of approaches for further projects regarding those topics. And since then, we've been working on realizing those individual projects or helping our partners to make them real. So just as a basic, to break it down to the very basic level, what are the building blocks for sustainable aviation on the technology side? And I think we can break it down to two elements, which would be electrification or hybridization of aviation and sustainable fuels. Both were mentioned before. I took the eGenius as an example for the electrification, which Professor Kallo might well know, who joined us by now. It is a pioneer for electric aircraft, and as it presents a viable product already for recreational flying, for example. And it was quite early on. By now, there are even commercial products available by Pipistrel, for example, which can also be used for limited commercial use in flight training, for example. The eGenius also nicely illustrates that new configurations for aircraft are made possible by electrification as well. We also see new concepts for larger applications in business aviation. For example, this full electrical concept by aviation, as well as hybrid solutions like this EcoPulse, which was presented by Airbus and supposed to be flying later this year. On the other half, we have the sustainable fuel, and that includes both the power to liquid or e-kerosene, as Andrew called it, which would actually show the whole chain from electric energy, sustainable electric energy, by electrolysis of hydrogen, adding carbon, ideally scrubbed from the atmosphere to make the whole circle, and making it emission neutral, so to say, all the way to the drop-in e-kerosene, if you will. But also the direct use of hydrogen, like in recent concepts by Airbus, burning it in relatively traditional jet engines, or perhaps more elegant, the use in fuel cell electric hybrid aircraft, as we have a couple of concepts coming up in the next couple of years. Coming back to our local projects regarding sustainable aviation, we are planning the technology center CEFA, which is potentially spread across multiple locations, actually. We're looking at the regional airports of Schönhagen and Strausberg around Berlin for those. And the focus of this technology center is on accessibility for small and medium enterprises and startups to either offer themselves or make use of test facilities needed for product development and certification. CEFA will be one of many regional centers in Germany, but aims to be complement to those, as opposed to competing with each other, especially with our friends in Cottbus, which are building up the CESCO test center together with the German Aerospace Center. We're in close cooperation to make sure that we complement each other and not do any double effort. The focus of CEFA will be on viable products in the sizing range up to CS-23 commuter size aircraft. We don't want to do basic research there, but offer easy access to low fidelity test equipment for the certification and compliance demonstration of actual flying products. Another project that came off the IBIFA nucleus, if you will, is the local network KIFA, which is tasked with initiating collaborative projects for the advancement of regional aviation towards lower emissions. And one of those projects is, on the other hand, the paper ETL, which is in the final stages right now, will be published in a couple of days, maybe weeks. And the point of this study is to model and simulate production plants for hydrogen or even power to liquid on decentralized positions on regional airfields. And I'm fully aware that we won't solve the energy problems of sustainable fuel with decentralized plants at the regional airfields. But for example, for hydrogen production, it's a whole different topic. And we might need some demonstration plants at smaller airfields for just to make it presentable, if you will. We take into account the local conditions, that means taxes, barriers, and incentives given by the lawmaker, as well as emission saving potential and economic efficiency of the alternative fuels at those airfields. The idea is also to have a template for other airports as well, to look at those solutions, whether they may fit or be a viable product for the advancement of their portfolio. And it's also meant as a living document, because it will be outdated in a couple of days already, because as Ms. Ruckmacher said, there's a lot of regulations coming up, and it's the same in Germany. The taxation regarding emission is changing as we speak. So many assumptions made in this paper will be outdated pretty soon, but we aim to update the document as we go along. So coming back to the original question, can sustainable aviation be a Kickstarter for the renaissance of regional airports? And that's a genuine question I would like to ask all the airport experts in this workshop. So because I personally come from aircraft development and certification, I'm no expert in aircraft management and in airport management. So I want to approach this question by making 3 claims, which I would like to hear your opinion on afterwards. So the first claim would be that regional airports can adapt faster to the emerging technologies, like I just described quickly, than large hubs can, because the smaller volume of fuel and or electrical energy needed there, as well as fewer passengers that need to be handled, mean that the impact to logistics and the environment at these airfields is smaller when doing these adaptations to the technologies than at larger hubs. So the planning and approval can be faster. The financial investment is also smaller, and that might be a bit naive, I know, but I would assume that there's fewer parties involved in the actual decision making, because and I know the board of regional airports can be quite complicated, but I have to assume that it's even worse for large international hubs, so that we might move quicker on these smaller, or at least the remote airports. The second claim I would like to make is that regional airports are the ideal entry to market for alternative fuels, and that explicitly means both hydrogen and power to liquid e-kerosene fuels. Because again, the relatively small volume we need to replace a sizable percentage of the fuel that is distributed at those airfields makes it much easier to handle the facilities needed for that. And that means blending at the spot where it's distributed. So we need to distribute it as blends. So we need to basically mix the fossil fuel with the sustainable fuel, which might be easier to handle at the smaller volumes. But also it might be a viable option, and our study seems to show that, to produce at least hydrogen locally with the sustainable, or with the renewable fuel, the renewable energy we get from local photovoltaics or renewable sources in the vicinity of the airfields. Because for those, the production cost of the electric energy is actually the driving factor for the price. And the next issue would be that the customers at those airfields, and I'm looking at business aviation specifically, are less price sensitive for fuel price. Meaning, if you compare it to the price that the airlines pay at the large international airports, they already pay a premium. And most of them, if you talk to the business aviation associations, would be fine with paying a little more just to have a greener footprint on their flights. And the next and last claim I would like to make is that the next generation of commercial aircraft is suited best for decentralized air transport. Because with the development cycles we have in the aviation, and we just heard that aviation is, what was the term? Well, on the forefront of innovation, so to say. We still have very long cycles in development before the product actually comes on the market and is distributed in any meaningful way. So it will probably take decades for the technologies we just described to reach long range and wide body aircraft, if ever, for some of the solutions. So for now, we're stuck, or in the immediate future, we're stuck with smaller and low to medium range aircraft, which might enable the renaissance I described, or I asked about for the regional airfields. Many of you might be familiar with the paper shown on the left, which is a study that was conducted by, among others, the German Aerospace Center about decentralized aviation in Germany. And the study finds that there are already about 300 routes within Germany, which could reasonably be operated with smaller aircraft, point-to-point operations. And while, as we already heard today, short and medium-haul flights are heavily criticized, it might be the only way to get sustainable aviation technologies in the air as soon as possible. And while we're at it, we might improve the passengers' mobility by more, but sustainable point-to-point flights. Because if we look at the Flight Path 2050 program, or the paper by the European Commission, it asks for a target of, I think it was 4 hours transport door to door within the European Union, and that can't be achieved by the classic hub and spoke system with the large airports. Yeah, those are the claims I would like to make, and it would be interesting to hear from you what you think about those, which already brings me to the end of my presentation. The projects I described are can be read about on our homepage. Most of them also translated in English, but if you have any specific questions, I would gladly answer them if you write me by email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lars, for your presentation. I truly hope that, yeah, sustainability can be a Kickstarter. But I have a question, because you mentioned that business aviation passengers are okay to pay a bit more. But do you think that people who are flying with Ryanair are ready to pay more as well?
I think, especially looking at the current state of energy prices and the fluctuations we have there, we might have to get used to higher prices anyway. But regarding the price parity for sustainable fuels against fossil fuels, it's really hard to say, to be honest. Our ETL study finds that in certain cases, hydrogen fuel cell driven aircraft might already be cheaper in some cases than conventional aircraft. And I hope that the tax environment, so to say, the incentives and the barriers refined by the lawmaker also helps with finding price parity on those.
Okay, we will see then. Okay, thank you. And we're moving to our last but not least speaker. It's Professor Joseph Callot. He's founder and CEO of H2Fly. And please, the floor is yours. You are muted. Maybe this.
I think here we go. Now it
Yes.
works.
Now it works. Yes.
Perfect. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm just sharing the screen. Can you?
Yes, yes, we can see it perfectly.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Today, I would like to give you an opportunity to understand what H2Fly, our company, is doing. So our purpose is to bring hydrogen to aviation and to enable passenger aircraft with hydrogen flying emission-free with an electric propulsion, so also with very low noise. And in this case, I will take you on a 10-minute journey and show you what our work is. So first of all, why we are doing this? We have more than 37 million tons of CO2 equivalent from the air travel in Germany 2018. And we have something like 39 million tons of CO2 on the light highway traffic in Germany. So it's definitely, it's not all the transport, but it's definitely a part which is worth to take a closer look how to minimize that. So in our case, we took a very close look to what are the possibilities in Europe. And I'm talking about mostly the 2000 kilometer maximum range. And what we have seen there is that we have a 590 billion annual passenger kilometers below 2000 kilometers in Europe. So including all the regional airports, including all the big airports, but just with connections less than 2000 kilometers. So that is an airline business of 50 billion plus, so total addressable market. And when we can say we can go to replace the aircraft traffic, which we have today, with an emission-free aircraft based on hydrogen electric propulsion, we can have a business for the propulsion units, not for the aircraft, not for the OEM, but just for the propulsion units, which is in the range of 10 billions a year, total addressable market. Additionally, we can save 320 megatons of CO2 Europe-wide under 2000 kilometers. And the good thing about this is using hydrogen electric, we minimize the noise, the level of noise from the gas turbines. So there is no noise at high frequency, which the human ear is very sensitive for. And with that, directly, we can save up to like 15 dBA of less noise. That is a lot when you think about putting these airplanes into regional airports, which are very much nearby to people and to houses, and flying over houses at low altitude than international airports. So what we have seen also there, that there are major routes which connect bigger and small airports with each other, where we can have an annual operator revenue on a couple of routes, which are very beneficial, more than 7.5 million a year. So for every point, for every route. And with that, we have a chance also with smaller plane to go and do business. What is our answer on this? Our answer is we would like to have a system which is 40 seat capacity, 2000 kilometers in range, and 0 gram of CO2. Just to give you an impression, with these 2000 kilometers in range, we can go from Spain to London, we can go from Germany to Sweden, we can go from Italy to Berlin, and have a direct flight to smaller airports. Together with our partner Deutsche Aircraft, we develop now, and we have a major government funding and additionally private investor money with a very high amount of money, where enables us to develop the first 40 passenger propulsion system, which is in a megawatt scale, and which then can be tested in the next couple of years. So with this in mind, just to give you an impression of where we are coming from. So at the moment, H2Fly wants to build a 40-seater with 2000 kilometers of range propulsion system and couple that with the OEM's aircraft manufacturers plane. And for that, we have a memorandum of understanding with Deutsche Aircraft to build that first prototype. But we also drive since 2016 together with a DLR, with the University University of Ulm. So just at the moment, the HY4 is performing flights at the international airport of Stuttgart, and we do long-range flights and we do operations flights. What means that we are fully integrated into an IFR traffic pattern, and we do a lot of operation evolution of rules for operations on ground. So this is, we are using this plane now with hydrogen electric propulsion system to understand what is needed to completely introduce a hydrogen electric plane in an international airport environment. Also successfully, we have a big development center now in Stuttgart where we can spread out now our work and our offices. And with that in mind, we go and develop together with 328 the system. So we are growing very fast. We started in 2021. We took over a lot of people from our former partners from DLR and the University of Ulm. Currently, we are 44 people. At the end of the year, we will have 90 people, and we have a very strong international, worldwide, but also strong European people on board to work on these questions. Our roadmap in 2022, we will have HY4. So this is the plane which is flying at the moment. So in this day, so today, yesterday, or the day before, and also last week, and it will go for the next couple of weeks until May and June to understand the operability of planes with hydrogen in a complete closed environment at an international airport. And then we will have also the first liquid hydrogen storage system implemented into this plane together with our partners, and then fly that to show that it's also possible to fly really long range. Based on that, we will have 2025, the 1.5 megawatt ground testing. This is just started 1st of January with the partner German Aerospace Center, Deutsche Aircraft, and 8 other partners. And in 2026, we will have the 1.5 megawatt aircraft test, which will have an electric driven DO 328 hybridized with fuel cells. In 2028, we see the starting of commercialization. Unfortunately, in this environment, it will take this time to do the commercialization start, but we are very confident that this can go very good. So this is the overview of the partners. We have Deutsche Aircraft, we have H2Fly, EABG, DLR, General Electric, HSG, Bauhaus Luftfahrt, AKG, Diehl Aerospace Aviation, and Premium Airtech on board. And with these very strong partners, I'm very confident that we will achieve that goal. What is our focus? Our focus is to look at the fuel cell and the tank system. So H2Fly will focus on the middle part, so the propulsion system with the electric powertrain and the fuel cell powertrain integration, how to upscale the components, how to upscale the system, and how to make this system safe and reliable. And then we have partners on the OEM side to build a plane, to integrate that into a plane, but also we have partners on the component side, and we also do component development there. So with this in mind, I can just tell you from a technological perspective, we see a very good roadmap. It's for us just a matter of time, money, and engineering. It's not as the physics would be against us. It's just investment, time, and confidence. So to be confident in the idea to move forward. And we think we can achieve that 40-seater. So that 40-seater, just to be clear, it's not replacement of an A320 with like 180 passengers moving around very fast and hauling a lot of passengers from Frankfurt to Stuttgart or from Frankfurt to Berlin. But for us, this is the step in with a relatively small amount of money, even if it's hundreds of millions, small amount of money to go into the CS25 environment, into the real commercial world. And this could be coupled also very well with applications on the regional airports. But we have 2 points which are major to be solved before we go to those applications with 40-seaters, 60, 100-seaters, including the regional airports. And one of those points is the integration of the aircraft transport system into the ground transport system. When I asking why is the regional airport of wherever not successful, then I can tell you one thing. I'm flying personally myself, so I'm a passionate pilot. I'm using a plane 150 hours a year, and I'm doing almost more than 70% of my traveling by private plane with small planes to travel around. This is the best I can have to go from A to B, to be fast, to have a lot of meetings, to be on time, and so on. So regional airports can be a backbone of very fast and very convenient travel. But regional airports are not included into the ground transportation. To get to regional airports, sometimes it takes you hours. I don't want to say a half a day, because that would be too bad, but it takes you hours to get there. So what we need is a full integration of regional airports into the full traffic. And that can be done today with electric cars. And that can be done very fast also if you have a 5-minute proposition. That is something which we would like to have. I just arrived 1 minute ago at the regional airport. 1 minute after that, I am through the door. 2 minutes after that, I am at the plane. 5 minutes after the arrival, I am sitting in a plane and I have the chance to take off. So this is something which we definitely, from a logistics perspective, we have to change that and we have to improve that. That is a key to enable hydrogen electric regional aircraft between small airports. There is another point, and that second point is the energy which is needed to drive new propulsion systems. And this is something I would like to take you on the journey, where this energy should come from. At the moment, we compete between hydrogen electric and fossil fuel burning gas turbines. Now, nowadays, we say, let's go and put synthetic air fuel, and let's have no change in the infrastructure, no change in the aircraft technology, keep it as it is, minimize the cost, and let's go and do business with synthetic air fuel instead of hydrogen. So I would like to show you just a perspective, what would happen if we have to change from fossil fuels to synthetic fuels, and we are not going the hydrogen path, just to compare that. So if we go with hydrogen, we can reduce 75 to 90% of climate impact gases if we go with the fuel cell, 50 to 75% reduction if we go with the hydrogen combustion, and 30 to 60% reduction if we go with syn fuel. That's fine. Silent operation, low vibration with the fuel cell, conventional aircraft with the same noise by burning hydrogen and going combustion of synthetic air fuel. There is one point. If we go with the hydrogen, we need new architecture for the infrastructure and for the propulsion and for the planes. That is something which current architecture and infrastructures on synthetic air fuel could just manage perfectly. But now we are coming to one point, and that is the energy provision. If I want to fly with the fuel cell base, so with a hydrogen fuel cell based, to produce the fuel, to use the fuel, let's say we need 100 units to fly the plane of energy, whatever it is, gas turbine, with synthetic fuel, with hydrogen, with fuel cell, whatever. We need 170 units of installed power generating renewables to produce that. If we want to fly with synthetic air fuel, there is no nature which has done the work for us in the couple, let's say the 5 million years behind us. We have to invest 460 units of energy to do that mission of 100 units. So this difference between 170 units of energy and 460 units of energy, what does that mean in the investments of renewables, which we need to produce our own energy? On the hydrogen part, let's take Europe. less than 2,000 kilometer in range, everything which we had in 2018-19 on traffic. For that, we need 370 terawatt hours to do those missions with hydrogen. That is an investment just to produce the energy, just to have the energy produced by renewables so we can use it for hydrogen production. We would need for that 280 billion euros. If we do the same thing with the syn fuel and we say we do not have to invest money for the aircraft technology, we do not have to invest money for the storage and the infrastructure, let's stay as it is. So let's go there, and then we have just storage infrastructure as it is, no new infrastructure for the hydrogen, no new aircraft technology development. We will have to invest 800 billion to produce the energy, to use that energy to produce the hydrogen needed for the syn fuel, to get the CO2 out of the air, to implement that into a syn fuel factory, and at the end, to get it into the storage. So if we look at the total perspective, and we do not expect that somebody else, some aliens or some outsiders of this world will just come in and give us the synthetic air fuel with the energy inside, but we have to take care of that. Then we are talking about 800 billion just to have the flights less than 2,000 kilometers in Europe. Comparing that to 300 total infrastructure, electrolyzer, and the renewable energy provider. So I would say for that difference of 500 billion, we should be able to develop a 40-seater, a 100-seater, a 200-seater airplane, which then can do electric emission-free aircraft flying all over Europe. So with this in mind, I will just ask you, please do not look just in a very small box, look at the whole system and ask questions how to provide the energy and how to use the energy to get to the mission which we want. Because otherwise, if we have to install this 960 terawatt hours energy producing renewables, I can tell you the price of a plane flight will be in the region 4 times, 5 times as it is today regarding fuel. So the only way I see it is with hydrogen from renewables, and we have done the calculations. The fuel price to go with hydrogen from Stuttgart to Milano, it's not so far away, would be in the region of 10 to 15 euros, the fuel price. Now imagine having that 4 times bigger here. I don't think everyone can pay that. So with this in mind, I'm at the end of my presentation. What I just can say is this, from a technology perspective, we are at the beginning of a new era. Electrification with hydrogen in aviation is possible. It will take some time. The money needed for that is really big for the investments on the energy, but also on the aircraft technology. We will talk about billions. But I'm not afraid about 10 billions, to be honest. I'm not afraid about 20 billions, because if I'm looking to what I have to invest to get the syn fuel or the fossil fuel as it is today, when we take the cost and internalize the cost, which today we are not paying for it, then I can tell you this is peanuts. So with this in mind, hydrogen for aviation, I think this is the right way to go. And yeah, let's move together forward. Let's change it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kahlo, for your presentation. And yeah, following your point on energy supply and production, and following the logic of decentralization and regional aviation, do you think that every region with an airport should produce its own energy? And do you think it's feasible and realistic?
I have a very serious and very direct answer on this. What we need is gigawatts of centralized installed power on renewable side, and what we need is gigawatts of installed electrolyzer power to produce the fuel, and then big storage units with the same energy density and with the same energy amount which we have today in the fossil fuel area. I'm not a friend of having 2,500 decentralized smaller units in Germany, which all of them has to be maintained. The safety has to be taken off, and so on and so on. And the efficiency, and at the end, we have like a completely distributed production system. I think the question is, how can we get as fast as possible to there? And that is producing energy from renewables, not only in Germany, but in Europe, we have very good chances. Take Spain, take Italy, some other countries with a lot of wind and so on. And then we need centralized big electrolyzers, gigawatt style. So just to get to that number, we would need 85 gigawatt installed power of electrolyzer running all the day through just to get this amount of energy. And if you would start now with 1 megawatt, which is a big electrolyzer, we would need 80,000 of those electrolyzers all around Europe. That is not realistic. Just for aviation under 2,000 kilometers. And that is something we can do. So what we can do is we can have small solar plants, maybe some wind plants under contract wherever, which put the energy into the network. So use some areas around the airport, but do not start having like a hydrogen electrolyzer with 200 kilowatt or 1 megawatt or even 2 megawatt at the airport. The handling of that fuel, the provision of the fuel, that has to be professionalized, and that has to be in an area and into a margin which is gigawatt hours and not small megawatt hours. And this will work only with the centralized point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. And I also see Thomas really wants to add something.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Carlo. Thanks a lot for that fascinating presentation. I agree. It is for sure it is difficult to produce hydrogen decentralized, but in order to give you a little piece of feeling what we can do and what we can assist from Aerodrome's perspective, I would assume that at least 10 to 30 hectares of photovoltaic is possible at more or less each medium-sized and smaller aerodrome. So with regard on 30 hectares, we can produce around 30,000 megawatt per hours per year. So it is a number. It is not that big gigawatts number, but at least it will contribute a lot to the green energy, and we should at least take that opportunity and use it to the greatest extent what we can imagine. We have other examples where we have 300 hectares. That is a really seldom area. That is really not the typical case, but 10 to up to 30 hectares is a number you can count on. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, and we should finalize our workshop today because we took every point of view on board, and I think it's time to wrap up. And I don't know, Thomas, if you would like to continue and wrap up our session, and we are done.
No, from my perspective, we have discussed every single point at each point, but I would be happy if Sergi has some contribution on it. And yeah, I would like to thank all of you for your contribution and the very interesting presentations. Alena, you said you're going to be able to share the presentations. Is that still valid? So we can go via your homepage to get it downloaded, or how does it work?
Yeah, I will send you an email, and it will be available on our website. Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, and Sergi.
Now, from my side, thank you very much as to all the speakers. I think for the audience has been hopefully very clear that we want to move, but how to move there, it's not so easy. As I have been an elected person at local and regional level, I do really understand, and I think it was very good, the words of Ms. Dorian Rookmaker, how difficult it is to decide which is the key, the clear road, because plus all the technology, all the economic legitimate interest, all the science, all the countries, all the political families. So at the end, you have a very complicated matrix or equation, and finally looks like maybe there was a solution. I think on the other hand, a lot of people from aviation, not so many already, are sometimes complaining about the greening of aviation. And I think this was too, for me at least, a very good example that, well, it's great that we have to move there, not only for us, for the people, because at the end we are the ones who live here, for the nature, for the animals, for the plants, for the future generation, but too for the sector, because there is going to be millions of euros invest already, plenty of studies, projects, pilot proofs, whatever, and this is good too for the sector. So I think in that sense, thank you. Yes, just to mention again, like Thomas, thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you very much for the people you have been attending. As you mentioned, it will not only be sent to all participants, if as Elena explained, it will be hung in our web, and it will be in 2 weeks' time in the newsletter we distribute for around 5,000 people. So 5,000 people will have the opportunity to, if they wish, to download and to have to hear and to see what we have discussed this excited afternoon. So thank you very much. Hopefully to meet you again in virtual, and hopefully it looks like nearer by life in Brussels, in Germany, in Spain, wherever.